So we've been doing a whole series of talks on the Faith Mind Sutra, which we had taken up at our long session way back when. And today is the fifth talk. We're maybe about a little more than halfway through. Those of you who were at that long session probably have a copy of this sutra. I printed out some copies for those of you who don't have one and would like one. It's on top of the shoe rack if you want to take one on your way out. If you don't get one, don't worry about it. I'm going to ask Lawrence to post it on our website, and then you could always print it out from the website if you want one and fail to get one today. So I'm going to read you everything that we've covered so far so that you get some sense of context for the part that we're going to do today. Faith Mind Sutra is written by Zen Center. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinions for or against anything. To set up what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind. When the deep meaning of things is not understood, the mind's essential peace is disturbed to no avail. The way is perfect like vast space, where nothing is lacking and nothing is in excess. Indeed, it is due to our choosing to accept or reject that we do not see the true nature of things. Live neither in the entanglements of outer things nor in inner feelings of emptiness. Be serene in the oneness of things, and such erroneous views will disappear by themselves. When you try to stop activity to achieve quietness, your very effort fills you with activity. As long as you remain in one extreme or the other, you will never know oneness. Those who do not live in the single way fail in both activity and quietness, assertion and denial. To deny the reality of things is to miss their reality. To assert the emptiness of things is to miss their reality. The more you talk and think about it, the further away you wander from the truth. Stop talking and thinking, and there is nothing you will not be able to know. To return to the root is to find the meaning, but to pursue appearances is to miss the source. At the moment of inner enlightenment, there is a moment of going beyond appearance and emptiness. The changes that appear to occur in the empty world we call real only because of our ignorance. Do not search for the truth, only cease to cherish opinions. Do not remain in the dualistic state. Avoid such pursuits carefully. If there is even a trace of this and that, of right and wrong, the mind will be lost in confusion. Although all dualities come from the one, do not be attached even to this one. When the mind exists undisturbed in the way, nothing in the world can bother us. When a thing can no longer bother, it ceases to exist in the old way. When no discriminating thoughts arise, the mind ceases to exist. When thought objects vanish, the thinking subject vanishes. Just as the mind vanishes, objects vanish. Things are objects because of the mind. The mind is such because of things. Understand the relativity of these two and the unity of emptiness. In this emptiness, the two are indistinguishable, and each contains in itself the whole world. If you do not discriminate between coarse and fine, you will not be tempted to prejudice and opinion. So that's where we've got so far. So today, this is today's portion, the lines we're doing today. To live in the great way is neither easy nor difficult, but those with limited views are fearful and irresolute. The faster they hurry, the slower they go, and attachment cannot be limited. Even to be attached to the idea of enlightenment is to go astray. Just let things be in their own way, and there will be neither coming nor going. Obey your own nature, and you will walk freely and undisturbed. When thought is in bondage, the truth is hidden, and everything is murky and unclear. The burdensome practice of judging brings annoyance and weariness. What benefit can be derived from distinctions and separations? So that's today's. So we're going to do as we usually do, go through it, take the lines, and see if we can parse them out a little bit and see what they mean. So the first line, to live in the great way is neither easy nor difficult, but those with limited views are fearful and irresolute. So why does he say that it's neither easy nor difficult to live in the great way? Ordinarily, we would think it's difficult, right? Doesn't Zen have the reputation of being a rigorous practice? But Seng-san has something else in mind here when he says this. What he's talking about is this: whenever something is measured, there always has to be a scale by which it's measured. You know, inches, centimeters, pounds, whatever. So implied in this case would be a continuum from easy to difficult. Another, the scale that you'd be using if you said it was easy or difficult would be a scale with easy on one end and difficult on the other. Maybe impossible would be on the other, I don't know. And then you'd have all these little gradations in between. So what the sutra is telling us here is that living in the great way falls nowhere on this scale from easy to difficult. It's not easy, it's not difficult, it's not in between. It simply can't be measured at all. This is what he's saying here. How does he figure this? It's because to measure something, you have to stand apart from it, and you have to compare it to the scale. So what he's saying is that when we live in the great way, we're one with our lives. We're not standing apart. We're one with the great way. So this way of understanding makes choices, decisions, disappointments much easier. We don't have to be so tense about what to do, because we're not standing apart, judging and second-guessing ourselves. There's some ability to relax. When we're one with the moment, we're apt to be more skillful in our actions as well. He's saying you're not separate from your lives when you're practicing the great way. You're not separate enough even to stand off and measure and judge things. Each moment of your life fills the universe, and there's no room for assessing. Therefore, we can't say that the great way is either difficult or easy. It just is as it is. We don't measure. This is the same thing that the Relative and Absolute Sutra means when it says, when you walk the way, it is not far, it is not near. Same reason, because it's filling everything. There's no way to say it's far or near. It is everything. You are one with it. Seng-san finishes this first line of today's portion by saying this: those with limited views are fearful and irresolute. If you're judging and you're finding the great way easy or difficult, then you have limited views. Then you're going to feel fearful and irresolute. In this second line, he describes what it feels like when you separate yourself from the great way or from your own life. It feels bad, it feels fearful, it feels irresolute. These limited views that he talks about here are the views of those who do not see the oneness of relative and absolute. You know, he talks about this oneness all the way through the sutra. We've talked about it in other talks. So here, Singh Sun is referring us back to these points he has made over and over again. Those with limited views would be those who cling to preferences. Those who get stuck trying to escape preferences by holding on to oneness. Whichever side you cling to, your views will be limited. You'll be that board-carrying fellow who has one side blocked off. So whether you're stuck in the absolute emptiness or you're stuck in the relative form, either way, it's not complete. These are limited views. You've got to see both all together as one. In the past parts of the sutra that we've talked about, he's said very similar things. At one point he says, if there is even a trace of this and that, of right and wrong, the mind will be lost in confusion. This confusion is because you have limited views. He says, if you do not discriminate between coarse and fine, you will not be tempted to prejudice and opinion. If you do distinguish, if you do have preferences, if you do have these limited views, then you are going to fall into prejudice and opinion. This is what he's telling us all. He wants us to see both truths, the truth of oneness, the truth of difference. And he wants us to hold both truths at the same time, not choose one or the other. He's telling us that if we're unable to do this, then that's when we're going to be fearful and irresolute. So he continues on to explicate further his points. The sutra continues by saying this, the faster they hurry, the slower they go. And attachment cannot be limited. Even to be attached to the idea of enlightenment is to go astray. So he says, the faster they hurry, the slower they go. He's already given us the same warning in another part of the sutra. He says, when you try to stop activity to achieve quietness, your very effort fills you with anxiety. It's making somewhat the same point. One of the great things about this Faith Mind Sutra is that although it's very dense and sometimes very hard to understand, you despair of knowing what on earth he could be talking about. Still, there's something very encouraging about it, something very soothing about it, because he wants us all to have a very calm feeling about our practice. I mean, basically, he's just putting his arms around us and saying, relax. He wants us to know that no matter how naughty some of these statements he's making sound, the process of realizing them is facilitated when we see practice as a sort of entirely natural and easy progression. You know, Zen is something people tighten up around. You know, at some Dharma centers, they actually encourage you to tighten up and push through. We try not to do that here, you know. It's more productive to take a breath and relax. What he's really saying here is that he says attachment cannot be limited. What he means here is not that, you know, you must have attachment to everything. He's saying the exact opposite, that if you're attached to anything, no matter how big or how small, then you can't limit that. You're going to be attached all over the place. This is what he's saying here. That once you attach, no matter where it is, how much, how little, then the game is over. You're going to be attaching all over the place. So he's saying that. The next line he says, even to be attached to the idea of enlightenment is to go astray. So you would think if there was anything permissible in Zen to be attached to, it would be, this goal of enlightenment. But he says, no, not even that. Don't be attached anywhere. And I would say maybe especially do not be attached to enlightenment. Because when we're looking forward to something, we're attached to it and we're pushing for something that we think is going to occur in our future, which would be, in this case, our enlightenment. We think it's going to come sometime. Then we're not in the present moment. We're thinking about the future. And the catch-22 is that the only place your enlightenment can take place is in this moment. It has to take place in a finite moment. So if you're never in that moment and you're always thinking about how it's going to happen someday, then you're blocking yourself from your own waking up. You're sabotaging your practice. To be attached to the idea of enlightenment also means this, that when we think enlightenment is something that can be described in words, that makes it an idea. I think it's something we can grasp and hold on to and reach. Then what we're really thinking is that enlightenment is external to us, and that we have to be always looking for it, searching for it. And yet, the teachings assure us that enlightenment is intrinsic to each one of us. We don't need to be anxious about it. In fact, we already have it, each of us. We just have to uncover it. We don't have to find it. We have to uncover it. So he's warning us here not to be in a hurry. And he also wants to debunk the idea that something is going to be different once we're enlightened. Most of us think that. We think our lives will be wonderful. If we didn't think things would change, we wouldn't need to be in a hurry. What would be the reason to hurry if it's still going to be the same old, same old? And actually, nothing changes in enlightenment except your point of view. You just kind of flip a switch and you see things differently. This is what changes. We're the same person. No magic powers. The world is the old world yet. And yet we're seeing differently. So nothing you can actually point to or hold on to actually changes when you're enlightened or realized or whatever you want to call it. What changes is ineffable. We can't describe it. We don't actually know what it is, maybe. We can't grasp it. Dogen assures us that even taking the posture of Zazen is equivalent to enlightenment. So what's the pressure and the tension for? Just relax and practice and let the practice slowly work. It is slow for most people. Occasionally there's a Zen genius who gets it in the weekend session, but not most people. I mean, look how long it took the Buddha. Years. He says, the faster you hurry, the slower you go. And meanwhile, while you're looking forward to enlightenment and all the changes that are going to take place, you spend a lot of time rejecting yourself as you are now and your life as it is now, because you keep thinking about this thing that's going to be better in the future. It's this attitude of getting something different when you're enlightened that prompts Barry to say Zazen is useless. This is true, it is useless, but just because it's useless does not mean it's not valuable. In the next line of the sutra, Sengsan says, just let things be in their own way and there will be neither coming nor going. He's continuing here with more of his soothing advice. Just let things be in their own way. Sounds like a Beatles song, right? The question arises as to just what their own way is. The Heart Sutra tells us what the way of things are. It says form is emptiness, emptiness is form. That's the nature of you, that's the nature of the universe. The way of all things is to contain both form and emptiness, oneness and two-ness, the relative and the absolute. That's the nature of all things. Therefore, in a way, we don't have to worry so much about the two sides that we're always talking about. Both sides are always before us in the same moment. When we start thinking about the nature of things and trying to understand what that is, rather than just experience the nature of things, we can get some pretty crazy ideas into our head. Why is that? Because words and ideas operate on the level of logic. And Dharma truth operates on the level of intuition. It's wordless understanding. So we can't really explain Dharma truths in words. In logical terms, the truth is made up of two sides, but both sides are contradictory. Form and emptiness. They're the exact opposite, so how can it be both? If you think of it in a logical way, it just doesn't make sense. So Dharma truth is on some whole other level. It's not words, it's not ideas, and that is why we can't grasp it. We can't grasp it with the mind. The intuitive level of understanding is facilitated by just letting things be in their own way. And this works better than stressing and straining. You know, stress and strain are always extra. They're something that we add on to a situation, to our life, to the moment. When we can follow Sengsan's instructions, he tells us there will be neither coming nor going. Neither coming nor going, or rising or falling, just this moment. You know, when there's just this moment and you're totally are that moment, there's no coming, there's no going. It's a kind of little eternity. What he's saying here is that there will be no preferences then, no dualities. And this is because we will cling neither to oneness nor two-ness. The sutra continues in the next line to give us some further advice. He says, obey your own nature and you will work freely and walk freely and undisturbed. So what is our own nature that we have to obey? It's Buddha nature. That's one thing we call it. So what is this term that we throw around in Buddhist circles, Buddha nature? We know from Buddhist teachings that we have the same nature as the rest of the universe. No difference between us and a plant on the stand. Same nature. Buddhism describes that nature as being subject to change. That's the nature of everything in the universe. It's subject to change. So it's never permanently the same. Another way of talking about that is to say it's empty. The nature of everything in the universe and us is empty. The other part about the nature of everything is that it's interdependent. That is, everything is a part of a context. We cannot separate ourselves from the causes and conditions which shape us and which we shape in our turn, and neither can anything else. It's one big thing. So we can call it one, even though we might think of it as having many different parts. But if you can't separate them, then it's one. So these two qualities of the universe, change and interdependence, are what Buddhism calls emptiness, and they are the basis of Buddhism's insight into oneness. We are interdependent and unable to extract ourselves from the context which contains the rest of the universe. So one way of talking about this truth is to say that everything is one, because we can't pull it apart. So to be one with everything, i.e. no separation, Sengsan is telling us, is to walk freely and undisturbed. You know, if it's all one, then there would be nothing outside that one that could disturb us or upset us. So we walk freely and undisturbed. Sengsan continues on. He says, when thought is in bondage, the truth is hidden, and everything is murky and unclear. The question here is, what constitutes thought that is in bondage? What's he warning us against here? Thought that is in bondage is thought that we are separate. And specifically in terms of the sutra, thought that separates the absolute and the relative. Sengsan has told us this many, many times before in the sutra, that it doesn't matter which one we cling to, both will equally bind us. Sometimes we think the absolute is better, more holy than the relative, so we cling to the absolute, especially we spiritual types. Sometimes we cling to the relative because we've not yet seen the absolute, and the relative is all we see. But neither side is the whole truth, and we must see both sides at once and realize that each contains the other. The question occurs then, how does this fundamental error of separateness make everything murky and unclear? What Sengsan is pointing out is that when we do not have the two truths straight, and the truth that ultimately they are one, clear in our seeing, then that is when our thought is in bondage. It's logical. If you start with a false premise, then everything that follows is going to be wrong as well. So if you don't see this oneness of the two truths, then, you're looking at things in a skewed way. Finally, the sutra goes on to say this, the burdensome practice of judging brings annoyance and weariness, and what benefit can be derived from distinctions and separations? He's telling us that judging brings annoyance and weariness. He's drawing an implication here from the lines that come before. He's telling us that we will not be able to avoid this burdensome practice of judging unless we clearly see both the relative and the absolute and see the relationship between them. Once we do this, the burdensome practice of judging lightens. This is what he's telling us. Why? Because absolute and relative contain each other. So in a way, we can't go wrong. It's like what Barry says about Zazen. You can't do it wrong. And we do feel weary and annoyed at having to make constant judgments. It's a mental work always having to figure out which choice to make. We have big life choices that are, people get very tense and upset about, large choices in their life. I even get weary in the supermarket trying to decide whether I should buy whole wheat or what's the other guy they always say, another kind of flour. It's not whole wheat. No, I would never buy. Oh, there's something called wheat flour, which isn't whole wheat, and then there's whole wheat, and I'm sitting there going, and then there's 7 grain. So hey, so it is a burden to make all these decisions. We might be making a decision between having a child or not having a child, having a medical procedure or not having it. And if we decide to have it, what kind of procedure should we choose? There might be more than one. What about moving to California or staying in Philadelphia? What about changing jobs or sticking to the one we have? We're always having these decisions, and they do feel burdensome. But once we see that on a very deep level, there might not be a difference and everything will be all right on some level, no matter what we choose, then we don't have to worry so much. We try to make the best decision we can. If you just pick one, by putting your finger on a piece of paper or something, that's not making a good decision. You do have to try to make the best decision you can, taking everything into consideration, the practical effects of your choice. But you also need to take into consideration the deeper truths of the Dharma. And then you leave the rest to the universe, having made the best decision you can. Sing Sun adds a final question. He says, what benefit can be derived from distinctions and separations? Surprisingly, to differ from him, there are some benefits. We can't escape from distinctions and separations in the relative world. It's a world of separation. So we do have to make choices. So it's a moral and a practical necessity to make the best distinctions that we can in our choices, trying to judge as best we can. On the other hand, he's been telling us from the beginning, from the very first line of the sutra, that there is no benefit in making distinctions. When we do and when we hold on, expecting a certain result because we made a certain choice, then we add to our burdens and our worries. This is part of the problem with making choices, is that we don't just make the choice, but we project forward as to what's going to happen if we make that choice. And then if it doesn't happen, we're disappointed and upset. We make the best choice we can and let it go. We have to deal with the results of our choice, whatever it is, and we can't predict results and blame ourselves for any choices that go awry. Each moment is complete and perfect in itself. It helps if we don't carry self-blame and recriminations forward from past choices. Once you've made the choice, however it turns out, it's not helpful to continue blaming yourself. Knowing that all is one in the Absolute eases our stress about making the right choice. It gives us perspective, and there is always the chance to start again in each new moment. Also, I think we have to have some kind of doubt about our ideas about what the right choice might be and what the right result might be, Many years ago when I got divorced, I probably thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. And I now look back on it, without pain for many years forward. And I see that my life would have gone in a very different way, and I think not a good way. So what did I know? Turned out what seemed to be a bad thing turned out to be probably a good thing. You know, this is a really stressful time for a lot of people, and it's particularly comforting here to hear Sing Sun's message of ease and naturalness in practice. You know, we've got so much stress, let's not add stress to our practice. He tells us to relax. And we can all use a little less tension in our practice and in our lives. So have faith in your mind, your Buddha nature, and the basic nature of the universe. And relax a little. Take your life one breath at a time, one moment at a time.